Rightio. Let's make a bullet. We've got our case, we've prepped it, we've squeezed it right back down to factory specs, we've chamfered, trimmed to length and chamfered. Let's make a bullet. We have our case, it's all prepped up, ready to go now, the primer's in place. The next thing we need to do is we need to get some powder in there, and we've got to get our projectile on top. Now, the powder I'm using, I've got ADI's AR2208. It's a excellent powder for the 308, known as Varget in the States. They're very good powder, very stable under different temperatures. It gets very hot up here. We basically don't have a winter, it's summer all the time in the territory. And we don't have any pressure issues in the high temperatures using ADI powders, but they also work quite well in cooler environments, from what I'm led to understand. So, how do we do it? Well, we've got our next step. We're going to use our press again. We have our number 2 shell holder. Put that in place for number 2 shell holder for the 308. We have our case that's prepped up, ready to go. I have my measured amount of powder. I've got 46 grains of 2208 here. And I suppose one of the beauties of reloading is being able to do something like this. Now, the 308, of course, it's a dime a dozen. You'll pick up 308 ammo in every gun shop, anywhere that supplies ammo anywhere in the world. It's very, very common. But what you won't get at a off a factory loaded round is something like this. I've got a 308 case, but I'm going to load a 30-30 projectile. This is a Woodley. It's a 150 grain protected point flat point bullet. These are a bonded bullet made by Woodley. They're excellent quality. Being bonded means the copper jacket is chemically bonded to the lead core, so that the lead and the copper won't separate when it hits the target. The reason why I'm using a projectile like this is a specific hunting bullet. The difference, if we can compare it to a target type round, this is a 155 grain Bob Dyer bullet. They use it for F-class, long range F-class type shooting. Has a tapered boat tail, very long, thin projectile. In comparison to the Woodley bullet, it's quite stocky and short and fat. Has a very big flat nose on the front, as opposed to the little hollow point in the target style bullet. Why do I want to use something like this? Well, I can use it for multiple purposes. First reason is that the performance of this projectile. These are very, very good performance. They have that big flat point, means that as soon as it hits the target, it's going to start imparting energy immediately. A 308 for the style of hunting that we're doing up here is sufficient. It has plenty enough knockdown power, but I want it to perform at its best, and you're just not going to get that out of a factory projectile with your pointed soft point type projectiles. With a flat point, you get that immediate expansion. It starts expanding immediately, but unlike your ballistic tip type bullets, which basically explode on impact, being bonded, it's going to hold together. So I'm going to get a huge energy on game straight away, while still having that deep penetration that you're going to get out of a bonded bullet. So it's a really good compromise for our use. But you can also use it if you're doing a lot of volume shooting and you tend to get a little worn out by the recoil. We can use the 30-30 projectile, which is designed to go at a slower speed and open up under the conditions that you'd fire out of a 30-30, so a good couple hundred feet per second slower than a 308. So we can back the 308 off. We can load less powder into the 308 case and still get 30-30 performance out of a 308 rifle. So you get all the different options of a 308 rifle and the excellent performance of a 30-30 type projectile. But me, I don't mind the extra little bit of recoil. I'm going to go for 46 grains at 2208. That gives me plenty of energy on game, and they work really, really well. Being bonded, it's not going to blow to bits like it might do with a softer hollow point style bullet. So I've got the little funnel there to stop making a mess. I just whacked my powder in there. That's loaded into the case now. That's a bit hard for you to see, but the 46 grains basically takes me right to the base of the neck, right to the top of the shoulder on the bottleneck. So that's basically the case is full. Now let's load it up. So all we need to do now, we've got our powder in place, we've just got to seat the bullet on top, and to do that we're going to use our press. So our number 2 shell holder, and then we have our seater die. Now this is the seater die here, 308 seater die. It screws down into the press same as any other die does. The trick with setting these up is to set them up exactly the same as you would if you were setting up your full-length sizer. So we screw that down and we raise the ram up. We're going to right down to the bottom of the stroke, so the ram's at the top of the stroke here. My locking nut, I'll just back that locking nut off a touch. We screw that right down till it touches the shell holder. Now with the with the seater die, we can use the integrated roll crimping feature in the seating die. So that means at the top of the stroke, once the bullet is seated right up, the die will squeeze in the top of the case. That's called a roll crimp, so it rolls the top of the case in. So to do that, we'd now raise the ram, we give it another quarter or a half turn or so, and that is now ready to go. But I don't want to do that. I've got a factory crimping die, and the beauty of the factory crimping die is that it doesn't cause some of the problems that you can get with a roll crimp. Now I showed you on an earlier video how we trim them all to length so that they're all uniform and they're all exactly the same length. With a roll crimp, because it's relying on the length of the case to crimp the die, uses the die to crimp the piece of brass onto the projectile. It's relying on the length of that case being exactly the same. If you don't trim them exactly the same, when you're using the roll crimping feature, you will cause a bulge in the shoulder. On this bottom edge here, you're actually forcing too much pressure onto the top of the case, and you force the case down and you cause a bulge. I've done this myself, so I'm showing you this on the video, hopefully so that you don't do it. The catch is that when you bulge that, when you go to chamber that case, it was full length size back to factory specifications, but you've now distorted the case and you've bulged that shoulder. So you go to chamber the round and it gets 95% into the chamber of your rifle, and then it won't go any further. And of course you're so close to that point where it's chambered that you try and force it that last little bit, it wedges right in there, and then it's really, really difficult to get out, and you've then now got a stuck live round. Not a safe situation. So you need to be very careful about having the same exact length, so that when you're doing your roll crimping, you roll crimp to exactly the same, to the exact same amount. Now, as I say, I don't want to do a roll crimp because I've got a factory crimping die. The factory crimping die, I believe, is better. So I want to back that off. So if I raise my ram up, that's touching now. I want to back that off a good turn or so, and I'll lock my locking ring down because I don't want any pressure at the top of the stroke. I want to be able to seat that projectile and not squeeze the sides in. I'll get that separate die and that separate procedure to do that. So we drop our case into place. We get our projectile, sit it on top. Now we just give it a little bit of guidance, feed it up inside the die, and that will now seat. Now, at the top of the die, we have our adjustment. So, as it begins to go into the case, you'll feel that little bit of tension as it starts to feed into the case. We want to have a look at our adjuster. I want to adjust it so that it adjusts right up to that crimping groove. See that crimping groove? It's a little bit difficult to see probably, but I want to sit that projectile right at the edge of the crimping groove, and then I'll crimp it, as I say, with that factory die. So I need to adjust this to suit. So I'll back it off. This adjusts up and down to how far in you want the projectile to go into the case. So I drop that right down to the bottom of the stroke. I lift it back up. We have a little look. I've got a good probably turn or two. I need to adjust that down to get that to the right length, a little bit more, and we've now got that seated so that it's right at that edge of that crimping groove. So that's ready to go. You could fire that right now without a problem. I haven't roll crimped it, I haven't factory crimped it, but it will chamber and fire no problems. But the beauty of the crimp is that, especially for hunting purposes, we can use that crimp to hold the projectile in place. We're out bush, we might be shooting off multiple rounds, there's a fair bit of recoil going on, and we want to have these projectiles not move about under that sort of stress. So this is a factory crimping die. The factory crimping die takes a little bit of setup, fairly easy. Screw that down into place. Now I've already got this adjusted to the right height, so I have that just screwed down tight. If I raise that up now, you'll see that the shell holder touches the bottom of the die, and then I've got a little bit of movement there. What we're actually doing is, when we're setting it up, we raise our ram right up, we screw down till it touches, and then we raise the ram and we're going to give it a good half. Depends on how much crimping you want. This one's a fairly heavy crimp. I've actually got about 3/4 of a turn on the crimp. So that gives you a really good solid crimp. If you want to go on a light crimp, you might want to give it a 1/4 of a turn. But the idea is that we actually push the die up and it squeezes the factory crimp into the sides of the case. So let's put our case into place. That's now ready to go. We raise that up, that now touches, we give that bit of weight to the bottom of the stroke, and that's now crimped. So the sides of the case now are pushed into that crimping groove. I'll just show you again. I'll pick the camera up and I'll show you again from the top, so you can see what's going on top. Just adjust that light a touch. So if you see on top here, we have 4 little marks. If I just squeeze that together, I'll raise the projectile up. You see the projectile coming up, and a bit hard to see, not so clearly focused, but as it gets to the bottom of the stroke, it squeezes those 4 points together. So you see those 4 little gaps here in the inside the die there, 1, 2, 3, 4. The projectile comes up through the case and then it squeezes the sides of the case in so that you get that factory crimp. Rightio, so that's making a bullet. I can now take my loaded round, specially customised by me, out bush, and see if I can shoot something with it.